When my mother's name flashed across my phone screen, I nearly dropped it in shock. Her calls were as rare as solar eclipses, exactly twice in the past 5 years. Once to inform me that Aunt Meredith had died, and once to mention offhandedly that my sister was getting married. I wasn't invited to the wedding, of course. Hello, I answered cautiously. Erica. Her voice carried the same flat tone I remembered. Your sister Vanessa and her husband are visiting this weekend. They want to see you. Come to dinner on Friday at 6. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone. 30 years old and still feeling like the unwanted child. I could have said no. Should have, probably. But some part of me, the part that still craved their approval, agreed to go. Friday arrived faster than I wanted. I called a taxi since I didn't want to deal with parking, and soon found myself standing in front of my parents' modest suburban home. The same home where I'd grown up feeling invisible next to my golden child sister. I smoothed down my simple black dress, professional but not flashy, and knocked on the door. No answer. I tested the handle and found it unlocked, so I stepped inside. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted from the dining room. Not just my parents and sister, as promised, but what sounded like a full family reunion. Great. More witnesses to my perpetual disappointment status. I stood in the doorway of the dining room, taking in the scene. My mother and father at either end of the table, Vanessa and her husband centered on one side like royalty, and various aunts, uncles, and cousins filling every other available chair. Everyone's attention was fixed on my sister. The second location should be open by summer, Vanessa was saying, gesturing dramatically. Brian's business is just exploding, aren't you, honey? Brian, her husband, nodded smugly. He owned a car repair shop, something I knew only because Cousin Amy occasionally texted me family gossip, and Caleb is already saying full sentences, Vanessa continued, referencing her 2-year-old son. The pediatrician says he's advanced for his age. My mother beamed with pride. Dad nodded approvingly. The assembled relatives made appropriate noises of admiration. No one had noticed me yet. I stood awkwardly in the doorway, scanning for an empty seat and finding none. Typical. I wasn't even expected to stay. Then Vanessa's eyes landed on me, and her smile shifted. Still there, but different somehow. Sharper. Well, look who finally decided to join us, she announced loudly, drawing everyone's attention to me. Come in, Erica. Come sit with successful people for once. I chuckled to myself, but kept quiet. Aunt Linda scooted her chair over, creating a sliver of space at the corner of the table. I squeezed in, balancing on the edge of the seat. As I was saying, Vanessa continued, We're opening the second location right here in town. Brian's going to commute between both shops until he finds a manager he trusts. My parents nodded enthusiastically. Your father and I are so proud, Mom said, reaching over to pat Vanessa's hand. You've done so well for yourself. Vanessa gasped in the approval for a moment, then suddenly turned her attention to me. So, Erica, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, are you still working as a waitress at that restaurant? The table went quiet. All eyes turned to me. It was true that I'd started waitressing right after high school. My parents had refused to help with college tuition, saying they were saving for Vanessa's education. I'd had to find my own way. Yes, I replied simply, still at the same restaurant. I didn't elaborate, didn't mention my actual position. Let them assume what they wanted. Vanessa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. God, you've always been such a loser, Erica. 30 years old and still carrying plates for tips. The relatives chuckled. My parents exchanged knowing glances and nodded in agreement. I should have been hurt, but instead I just smiled to myself. If they only knew. Actually, Vanessa announced, clapping her hands to get everyone's attention. I've gathered you all here for a reason. Next Saturday, Brian and I want to treat everyone to dinner at the best restaurant in the city to celebrate his success. It's going to be amazing. Excited murmurs rippled around the table. Everyone looked delighted until Vanessa turned to me again. Except you, Erica. I'm not inviting you. Her smile was poison sweet. You're too poor to be the part of a family celebration at a place like that. You wouldn't fit in. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. Unless you're working there as a waitress, of course. Then you could at least serve us. The table erupted in laughter. I could see them all waiting for my reaction, expecting tears, embarrassment, pleading. Instead, I calmly finished the food on my plate, dabbed my mouth with a napkin, and said, "I won't insist. You all enjoy yourselves." Their disappointed faces would have been comical if they weren't my family. When it became clear I wasn't going to provide the emotional breakdown they'd hoped for, they quickly lost interest in me. The conversation turned back to the upcoming dinner, which restaurant they'd go to, what they'd order, who would sit where. I quietly gathered my purse, slipped away from the table, and called a taxi. No one noticed me leave. No one said goodbye. The taxi dropped me at my building, a luxury high-rise in the best part of downtown. The doorman greeted me by name as I walked through the marble lobby to the private elevator that led directly to my penthouse apartment. As I kicked off my shoes and poured myself a glass of expensive wine, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. My family still saw me as the poor waitress, the family failure. They had no idea who I'd become. I couldn't help but think back to where it all began. At 16, I started working part-time at a dingy cafe downtown. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. "Mom, I need new jeans. These have holes in them," I pleaded one day after school. She barely looked up from helping Vanessa with her science project. "Don't be so demanding, Erica. We can't afford to buy you new clothes every time you want them." Meanwhile, Vanessa's closet was bursting with brand new outfits, and she had the latest iPhone while I was still using a flip phone from 3 years ago. So I got the cafe job. The pay was terrible. The hours long, but it meant freedom. I stopped asking my parents for anything. Bought my own clothes, my own phone, my own life. I remember overhearing my mother at a family dinner when I was 17. "Erica will probably be a waitress all her life," she told Aunt Linda. "She's not bright or talented like Vanessa." At 18, after high school graduation, the final blow came. "We can't help with your college tuition," my father announced. "We're saving for Vanessa's education. She has real potential." That night, I packed my things and left home. Found a job at a restaurant in the city center. Not prestigious, but they hired anyone willing to work hard. I moved into a cramped apartment with 2 other waitresses, Maria and Jen. We barely made ends meet, but at least I was free from my family's constant comparisons. I'd see photos on social media of Vanessa at beach resorts with my parents, or skiing in Colorado, or touring Europe. Then came the proud announcement of her starting college. The education my parents couldn't afford for me, but somehow managed for her. I pushed those thoughts away and focused on my job. The restaurant, Bellini's, was in a prime downtown location, but struggling financially. The food was mediocre, the service inconsistent, and the decor outdated. But I showed up every day, learned everything I could, and never complained. On my days off, I enrolled in restaurant management courses at the community college, paying my own way 1 class at a time: restaurant finance, menu engineering, staff management, marketing strategies. 2 years into my time at Bellini's, I noticed things getting worse. Fewer customers each week, more food waste, staff turnover increasing. One evening after closing, I found the owner, Robert Dawson, sitting alone with a glass of whiskey, staring at spreadsheets. "Everything okay, Mr. Dawson?" I asked as I finished wiping down tables. He sighed heavily. "Not really, Erica, thinking about selling or rebranding. This place is dying." I hesitated, then gathered my courage. "Rebranding won't help." His head snapped up. "Excuse me? Sorry, but it's true. The problem isn't the name or the logo. It's the concept itself." I expected him to get angry, but instead, he gestured to the chair across from him. "Tell me more." So I did. I explained how our menu was too extensive. 20 pasta dishes when our chef only made 3 of them. Well, how we were trying to be high-end, but didn't have the quality to justify the prices. How we were missing the lunch crowd completely with our limited hours. "What would you do differently?" he asked, his interest genuine. Focus on what we do best. Cut the menu to 15 items total, the ones people actually order. Create tiered pricing, affordable lunch options, and premium dinner selections, and start a delivery service for people working late in the office buildings around us. Robert stared at me. Where did you learn all this? Management courses at the community college, and watching this place lose money for 2 years. He laughed, not mockingly, but with surprise. How old are you, Erica? 22. Robert nodded slowly. How would you like to be Bellini's new restaurant manager? Help me implement these changes. I need someone who understands both the theory and the reality of this business. Someone who sees problems and solutions, not just complaints. 2 weeks later, I had my own small office and the enormous responsibility of transforming a failing restaurant. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I worked 18-hour days redesigning menus, retraining staff, establishing new systems, and overseeing a modest renovation that made the place feel contemporary without being trendy. 6 months later, Bellini's had lines out the door. Our delivery service was running nonstop during lunch and dinner. We'd cut costs by 30%, while increasing revenue by 45%. Within 2 years, we opened a second location across town, then a third in the financial district, each one profitable from day one because we'd refined our model to near perfection. On my 24th birthday, Robert invited me to dinner, not at one of our restaurants, but at the most exclusive place in the city. I have a proposition for you, he said after we'd ordered. I want to make you a partner. 30% ownership in all current and future restaurants in our group. I nearly choked on my wine. That's too generous. It's not generosity, it's business. You've turned one failing restaurant into 3 successful ones. I'd be an idiot not to lock you in as a partner before someone else steals you away. That night changed everything. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was an owner. We expanded rapidly after that, opening 2 more locations within a year. By my 26th birthday, I bought my penthouse apartment. By 28, I had my own investment portfolio. And now at 30, I oversaw 8 successful restaurants with over 200 employees. All while my family still thought I was carrying plates for tips. I snapped back to the present as my phone chimed with a notification. It was a message from Melissa, our reservation manager, at the original Bellini's location. Just confirmed a large party booking for next Saturday evening, 7:00 p.m., name Vanessa Cooper. I stared at the message, then burst out laughing. Of all the restaurants in the city, my sister had chosen mine for her big family celebration, the very celebration I wasn't good enough to attend. I spent the week leading up to Saturday in a state of nervous anticipation. Every time I thought about my family walking into my restaurant, not knowing it was mine, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. Robert noticed my distraction during our weekly management meeting. Everything okay? He asked after everyone else had left the conference room. You seem off today. Robert had become more than a business partner over the years. He was a mentor, a friend, and the closest thing to family I had these days. His wife Diane and their kids often invited me over for holidays when they knew I had nowhere else to go. My sister's bringing my entire family to Bellini's on Saturday, I explained. The original location. His eyebrows shot up. The same family that thinks you're still a waitress. The ones who didn't invite you to the dinner. I nodded. Well, that's convenient. A slow smile spread across his face. Are you going to tell them? I'm thinking about it. Robert leaned back in his chair. Erica, I've known you for 8 years. You've rebuilt my business, expanded it beyond what I thought possible, and never once have you asked for recognition from anyone except those people. Don't pretend this isn't important to you. He was right. Despite all my success, some part of me still craved my family's approval, or at least wanted to see their faces when they realized how wrong they'd been about me. I'll be there, I decided. Saturday evening arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I arrived at Bellini's an hour before my family's reservation, checking that everything was perfect. Not that I needed to. Our staff was impeccable, but it gave me something to do. I changed into a tailored black dress and my executive name badge, which clearly stated Erica Mitchell, owner and executive director. Then I positioned myself in my office, which had a glass window overlooking the main dining room, and waited. They arrived in a group: my parents, Vanessa and Brian, several aunts and uncles, and a few cousins. 14 people total, all dressed in their finest. I watched as the host led them to the large round table in the center of the dining room, our best table, which Melissa had reserved without my asking. Vanessa was holding court, gesturing grandly, clearly the center of attention. My parents beamed with pride, nodding at whatever she was saying. It was like a scene from my childhood playing out all over again. I stayed in my office until they had ordered drinks and appetizers. Then, taking a deep breath, I stepped out and walked slowly toward their table. My cousin Amy spotted me first. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't say anything. Then, one by one, the others noticed me approaching. "Well, look who it is," Vanessa announced loudly. "Are you going to be our waitress tonight?" "How perfect," I smiled calmly. "Actually, I won't be able to serve you tonight." "Too busy with other tables," Brian smirked. "Too busy running the restaurant," I replied, gesturing to my name badge. "And the 7 others in our group." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's mouth fell open. My father's face turned an interesting shade of red. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. "You own this place?" my father finally managed to ask. I corrected with Robert Dawson. "We've been partners for 6 years now." "But you said you were still working at the same restaurant," my mother said accusingly. "I am. I just didn't specify my position." I shrugged. "You never asked." Aunt Linda, who had made space for me at the family dinner, was the first to recover. "Erica, this is wonderful. The restaurant is beautiful. You must be so proud." Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. How had I done it? When had this happened? Why hadn't I told them? My cousins looked impressed. My aunts and uncles seemed genuinely interested. Only my immediate family, my parents and Vanessa, sat in stunned silence. "Sorry to interrupt your celebration," I said, "but I just wanted to recommend today's special. The truffle risotto is exceptional, though. At $80 per plate, it might be a bit expensive." I looked directly at Vanessa as I said this, echoing her words about me being too poor to attend. Her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She'd lost her audience. All attention had shifted to me. "I should get back to work," I said. "Enjoy your evening." I returned to my office, closing the door behind me. Through the window, I could see the chaos I'd left behind. My relatives were all talking at once. Vanessa was red-faced and furious, snapping at Brian whenever he tried to speak. My parents looked dazed, occasionally glancing toward my office. I should have felt triumphant. This was the moment I'd sometimes fantasized about. The big reveal, the shocked faces, the sudden realization that they'd underestimated me all along. But instead, I felt empty. Their approval or disapproval shouldn't matter anymore. I had built a life without them, succeeded without them. What was I trying to prove? I turned away from the window and focused on my laptop, reviewing plans for our newest location. We were expanding to another city next month, our first venture outside the metropolitan area. There was still so much work to do. An hour later, as my family was finishing their desserts, my office phone rang. It was the host station. "Miss Mitchell, your parents are asking to speak with you before they leave." I hesitated, then agreed to see them. They entered my office nervously, looking around at the awards on the walls, the framed restaurant reviews, the photos of me with Robert at each grand opening. "This is quite impressive, Erica," my father said stiffly. "Thank you. We'd like to have dinner with you sometime," my mother added. "At your home. We'd love to see where you live now." I knew exactly what was happening. Suddenly, I wasn't the family failure anymore. I was successful, wealthy, worth acknowledging, worth knowing. "I'm sorry, but I'm extremely busy right now," I told my parents. "Opening a new location takes all my attention. Have a good night." After they left, I watched through my office window as the family gathered outside the restaurant. My sister was gesturing wildly, clearly upset that her big celebration had been overshadowed. My parents looked shell-shocked. The rest of the relatives kept glancing back at the restaurant, probably still processing what had happened. The next morning, Sunday, I woke to 3 missed calls from my parents and a text message asking when we could meet. I didn't respond. Monday brought 5 more calls and a voicemail from my mother, suggesting lunch at any restaurant you choose, darling. Tuesday, it was my father saying they were so proud and wanted to be part of my life again. By Wednesday, the calls came from aunts and uncles, too. Cousin Amy texted that everyone was talking about me, amazed by my success. Aunt Linda called to say she'd always believed in me, a convenient revision of history. On Thursday morning, as I was reviewing applications for a new chef position, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Erica Mitchell." "Erica, it's Brian, your sister's husband." That was unexpected. "What can I do for you, Brian?" "I'll get right to the point. I'm expanding my auto repair business. As you know, the bank is being difficult about the loan. I was hoping you might be willing to lend us $50,000 as a family investment." I nearly laughed out loud. "And why would I do that?" "Well, we're family," he said, as if that explained everything. "And it would mean a lot to Vanessa. She's been upset since Saturday night. I bet she had her moment of glory, ruined by the sister she'd spent years dismissing as worthless. I'm not interested in investing in your business, Brian, but I wish you luck with the bank." "Come on, Erica. You've got money now. Wouldn't kill you to help out your sister." The same sister who publicly called me a loser and said I was too poor to attend her dinner. That sister. There was a pause. "She didn't mean that. You know how Vanessa gets." Unfortunately, I did know. I'd spent my childhood and teenage years knowing exactly how Vanessa got entitled, cruel, and perpetually enabled by our parents. My answer is no. Don't call again. I hung up. Less than an hour later, Vanessa herself called. "You selfish bastard!" She spat without preamble. "You've always been jealous of me, and now you're getting back at me by refusing to help Brian." "I'm not jealous of you, Vanessa. I never was." "Then why won't you lend us the money? You can clearly afford it. You just want to see us suffer." I took a deep breath. I spent years being ignored by this family, years being told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. Now that I have something you want, you suddenly remember I exist. There was a long silence. "Fine," she finally said. "Be that way. Everyone's talking about how money has made you cold and mean. How you think you're too good for your family now?" I almost laughed at the twisted logic. "Goodbye, Vanessa." I blocked her number immediately afterward. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work. We finalized plans for the new location, hired key staff, and refined our menu for the different market. Robert and I spent long days in meetings and longer nights worrying about 1,000 details. My family continued their campaign of reconciliation. Flowers arrived at my office. My mother left tearful voicemails. My father sent an email reminiscing about my childhood accomplishments he'd never acknowledged at the time. I ignored them all. "You know," Robert said one evening as we reviewed design plans for the new location, "you could just meet with them once, get it over with." I looked up from my laptop. "Why would I do that?" "Because they're not going to stop and it's distracting you." He wasn't wrong. Despite my best efforts to focus solely on our expansion, thoughts of my family kept intruding. Memories of past slights, fantasies of telling them exactly what I thought. Imagined conversations where they apologized for years of dismissal and favoritism. What would I even say to them? Robert shrugged. "The truth that you built this life without them and you don't need them in it now. Or that you want a relationship but only on new terms. Either way, closure might help you move forward." "Maybe." I conceded, but not yet. We have too much work to do. And we did. The new location was a massive undertaking, our biggest yet. We were creating not just a restaurant, but a culinary event space with private dining rooms, cooking classes, and a rooftop bar. It was ambitious, expensive, and exactly the challenge I needed. On the day we finalized the lease, Robert and his wife Diane took me out to celebrate. To new beginnings, Diane toasted, raising her glass. And to the best business partner Robert could have found. "I still can't believe you were only 22 when you pitched me that restaurant overhaul." Robert added. Smartest decision I ever made was listening to you. Thank you, I said, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine, for taking a chance on me, for believing in me when no one else did. Diane reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's what real family does, Erica. They believe in you, they support you, they celebrate your successes instead of being threatened by them. Her words hit home. The people at this table, Robert, Diane, our restaurant managers, our chefs, even our regular customers, had shown me more support and appreciation than my biological family ever had. They were my real family. Now, as I looked around at their smiling faces, I realized I didn't need closure with my parents or sister. I didn't need their approval or their belated interest in my life.